Man, the 49ers have had a lot of injuries, but this one just felt different. The Fred Warner season-ending injury, Kyle Shanahan said after the game, basically confirmed what everybody could see. Fred Warner sustained an right ankle dislocation and fracture. Seeing him in the air cast, being carted off the field was just a crushing blow to everybody involved. 49ers go on to lose this game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 30-19. And so, the big question is just where do they go from here? With Warner, who is basically the heartbeat of that team, 49ers have lost their two most important, most impactful the two players that I don't think they could afford to lose, certainly not on the defensive side, with Nick Bosa being out and now Fred Warner, just a crushing blow. And so he'll undergo season-ending surgery. He can be back next season. He can be the same player he was when he left the field. And boy, the player he was when he left the field, he really was on that arc of being a potential NFL Defensive Player of the Year. And I'm rarely ever amazed by Fred Warner and the stuff that he can do on the football field. But early in that game, when he absolutely blew up that screen play, that screen pass, that was Fred Warner. That was vintage Fred Warner. And then to see him go down with the injury was just, I know Juwan Jennings in the locker room there at Raymond James Stadium talked about how he actually felt nauseous upon seeing that injury and seeing the leader of the team being carted off, air cast on his right foot. So, what does this mean now for the 49ers? And I really think that, when this week began, during the week, when John Lynch talked about making phone calls about available edge rushers, it really has to impact, I think, how the 49ers view the rest of the season. They're 4-2. They're obviously very much in the playoff hunt. They're still atop the NFC West based on their 3-0 record within the division. But now you just have to be honest with yourself. Are they capable of accomplishing all the things they set out to accomplish? It's such a tough ask. The pass rush was already lacking without Nick Bosa. One sack on this day and very little pressure on Baker Mayfield. Michael Williams gets that sack. The one play where they probably had the best pressure on Baker Mayfield, Travis Gibson and Bryce Huff, they allowed him to kind of sneak through there and pick up 15 yards on a 3rd and 14 play. Really, to me, that was the turning point of this game, a game that was very much there for the 49ers to have a chance to win this game. But with the 49ers draft capital that they have for next season, with where they are and what's realistic for this season, does it make any sense for them to invest draft capital that could be used in the future on trying to get markedly better this season? And I'm not sure it does. I just think that, as fun as it is to talk about Trey Hendrickson or any of the other defensive, the edge rushers that could be out there, I would say the only thing I would say on that subject would be if the 49ers are going to make a trade for an edge rusher, I would think it's got to be for somebody who has more than 1 year left on his contract. I think they did that a couple of years ago when they got Charles Omenihu. They got him for multiple years. I think that's what they got to be looking at if they look to make a deal. And I still think they probably will look to make a deal. But you just wonder at this point, can the 49ers make a run at the NFC West? I think they can. Can they, once they get to the playoffs, if they get to the playoffs, can they make a deep run within the playoffs? I think that's where it becomes very difficult. When you're going up against quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield, like potentially Matthew Stafford, like Jared Goff. I think it just becomes really, really difficult for what this team has right now. And so you've seen, the 49ers are, they're rolling with the young guys, and they made a commitment on Sunday to go with young guys in the defensive backfield. Jason Pinnock has lost his starting job as the 49ers on this day went with Jair Brown and with Marquise Siegel as the starting safeties. Marquise Siegel has a lot to learn, a lot of experience to gain. And I think that that's part of the point for the 49ers right now, is to let him get out there, let him play, let him learn from his mistakes. Malik Mustafa will probably be back in the starting lineup week 7 against the Atlanta Falcons. I think that, they view him as their best safety. So I would assume that they're going to want him to play and play a lot now that he's back off the PUP list. And he did play, I think, a lot later on in this game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but it just wasn't good enough. Baker Mayfield on this day, even though Mac Jones had nearly 100 yards passing more than Baker Mayfield, Mayfield was very, very efficient, throwing for 256 yards on only 23 passing attempts. So that's an 11.1 yard pass, yards per pass attempt. That is really, really good. 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, a 139.0 passer rating. Mac Jones, I thought, played well. Pass protection was not good. Mac Jones didn't get rid of the ball, sometimes held it a little bit too long, and on this day sacked 6 times for a team that had only allowed 7 sacks in the first 5 games of the season. So the run game finally scored a touchdown, but again, Christian McCaffrey, the yards just weren't there, only 3.2 yards per carry. McCaffrey, 54 yards rushing, 57 yards receiving. And Kendrick Bourne, I mean, who would have thunk it? Kendrick Bourne, 5 catches, 142 yards in back-to-back games after never going over 100 yards. He had his previous career best in his first 8 seasons was 100 yards on the button, but now 142 in back-to-back games. Juwan Jennings, keep an eye on this. On the 49ers Talk podcast, Jennifer Lee Chan talked a lot about what she saw on the sidelines between Juwan Jennings and Kyle Shanahan, some words between those two. After the game, Juwan Jennings revealed that he has 5 broken ribs. And it's kind of interesting that a guy who would have sustained an injury just 2 weeks ago in that game against Jacksonville, usually guys try to conceal the fact that they have that kind of an injury, especially when you're talking about ribs that, players on the other team can target. But I think it was pretty clear. It sounded like that Juwan Jennings kind of wanted people to know the sacrifice that he's making for this team. And on this day, only 3 targets, 1 catch for 7 yards. So, offensively, 49ers didn't do enough to win this game. Couple of turnovers, 2 interceptions. Mac Jones wasn't responsible for that first one. That looked like that was very much on Kendrick Bourne running the wrong route against, or the wrong adjustment off of the defense that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were playing. That was on the very first pass attempt of the game for Mac Jones. And then later, kind of a questionable coaching decision. I understand it, where Kyle Shanahan decided to pass up the 52-yard field goal attempt. I think it would have been. It was an 8-point game at the time, talking, in the fourth quarter. And I think the idea was, because the 49ers were having such a difficult time shutting down the Tampa Bay offense at that point, that he had an opportunity there down by 8 to just go ahead, try to score a touchdown, get that 2-point conversion, tie it up right there, rather than, in essence, kicking the can down the road, trying to get the field goal and then stop Tampa Bay and then come back and score again. So, I mean, I get it, but Eddie Pinheiro has been very impressive in his short stint with the 49ers, and he remained perfect on a day where he made a lot of kicks, 4 field goals. The problem with the 49ers offense is just that. They're sending Eddie Pinheiro out for way more field goal attempts than extra points. 4 field goals on this day, just the 1 touchdown, the short touchdown run from Christian McCaffrey. So that's where the 49ers are. I don't know that. I mean, this is a very low point for this team, not just the 30-19 loss, but it's the loss of Fred Warner. And now those young guys are really going to have to step up. And Tatum Bethune, he stepped in with the green dot, played middle linebacker. I thought he played well, 10 tackles to lead the team. But this is really a coming of age moment here in a few weeks for the 49ers defense in particular, to see what they can do without Nick Bosa, without Fred Warner, to see if they can just keep this thing together. It's a team that has been ravaged by injuries, and this one, like I said, man, this one hit different, losing Fred Warner in the fashion that they did. And so a lot of work to do. This will be, I think, a sequence here the rest of the season that really defines the character of this team. Can they stick together through this? I know Fred Warner will remain around the team. He's going to help those young guys, but he can't go out there on the field with them anymore. And so these young guys are going to have to take ownership of this. There's a lot on Robert Saleh's plate at this point, because these young guys are going to make mistakes. There's going to be blown assignments, as there appeared to be on Sunday against Tampa Bay. So they got to tighten that up. They have to all get on the same page, and young guys at every level of the defense, from the young defensive linemen to now the very young linebacker group, to the corners, the safeties, young safeties. They're going to have to come together and play some lights out football to prevent this season from going downhill rapidly. So 49ers 4-2 on the year. And, the winning that game against the Rams in week 5, all the more important now. I think we knew this was a bad matchup for the 49ers at this stage, going to Tampa Bay and facing a red-hot Baker Mayfield and that Tampa Bay offense. And heck, Tampa Bay really didn't even have Emeka Egbuka in this game, as he left pretty early with a hamstring injury. So 49ers, really this is as big a challenge as they could possibly face. They've gotten used to playing the next man up mentality. They're used to playing without some of their top players, as has been the case this season with Brock Purdy and George Kittle out for extended periods of time, with Nick Bosa out for the season. But it really doesn't get any more heart-wrenching than seeing Fred Warner go down with a season-ending injury. Once again, fractured ankle, dislocated ankle, surgery, out for the season. So that's where the 49ers are. I think it's kind of I guess when I think of John Lynch and what his chore is at this point, we talked about earning the privilege of the team going out and making a trade. Now they're really going to have to do that. They're really going to have to play good football, because I would think that the inclination for the organization at this point would be simply this: don't do anything now that strips away resources for the future, because as long as Bosa comes back next season and Warner comes back next season, and they're players, the same players that we've seen in the past, next year and maybe the year after will be the 49ers' best chances of winning. It's not necessarily this year. That said, a lot can be accomplished this season, and maybe the 49ers can shock the world with this young group of players who everybody knew they were going to have to contribute at some point. They're going to have to make big splashes as rookies and young players, and now that's even more evident after the injuries, the season-ending injuries that they've sustained up to this point. All right, thanks for watching this video, and love to hear what you have to say on this topic in the comments down below. Thanks so much, and that is it for now.